You're watching Experience Comic Culture and Sales, streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. I had to sing it because otherwise Pete Seeger's people would have copyright struck us, taken us off the air. It would have been a whole thing that the union cabal would have been. Anyway, solidarity with SAG-AFTRA and the WGA coming from here. But the show today, this is Devil's Advocates, and the show today is about the writer's strike and the actor's strike. And what does it mean for you as comic book aficionados and aficionados of pop culture as a whole? I'm sorry you had to listen to me sing. No, I'm not. This is Devil's Advocates. What's up, the internet? It's producer Kyle. That guy with the glorious beard over there, as mine is all unkempt and disheveled, is Bronze Age Nerd.
Hey, Kyle.
Welcome into the Devil's Advocates.
Well, we're here. I am currently not on strike, so I was able to bring you guys this topic today. But a lot of people out there are, and there's talks of even more strikes happening. So this is definitely something that is going to have an impact on comic books. It's going to have an impact on the comic book world. In addition to some of the ones we talked about in the intro, there's also a potential UPS strike coming that could affect a lot of distribution for comic books. So definitely interesting topic. We want to hear about your opinions. Do keep in mind that we do read the chat. Even if we don't say hello as soon as you bounce in, we definitely are seeing your comments, and we'll bring up anything you guys want to put in chat.
Absolutely. So the topic and the impetus for all of this is that since we were last on the air, the actors have joined the writers in striking against the AMPTP, which is the conglomerate under which the big Hollywood studios are negotiating with those companies or with those unions. So we thought that we should talk about that and what it means for comics and kind of talk about how it makes us feel. Then I found out that I'm not allowed to do any of that. So I am a member of one of the unions that isn't on strike, but because of solidarity, I have to follow certain strike rules. So it's going to be weird. As I'm probably been following this a little closer than Bronze, I should really be leading the show, but in a loophole in contractual language, I can only talk about this topic in the most broad terms unless asked specifically about it.
Well, I mean, to be fair, you say it's going to be weird, but come on, it's Devil's Advocate. It was going to be weird anyway, no matter what we did.
Right. It's true.
So, yeah.
And I just did a whole show where we talked about tacos. So, I'm in a weird mood anyway.
Nice. Was it like which taco is the best taco?
No, it's a show where we're supposed to be talking about nerd news, and we talked about tacos.
Sweet. Well, in case anybody was wondering, fish taco is my winner. Just throwing that out there. Kyle is the definition of weird.
Stay in your lane, Jolly Green. Hey, Pat, what's up? Just so everyone gets the reference, Pat is 19 feet tall and came down from a beanstalk one day and decided that Traverse City was the town that was his now, and if anybody makes him angry, he'll destroy it.
Fee fi fo fum.
Yes. The only thing bigger than Pat is Fing Fang Foom. Anyway, so yeah, we're here to talk about the writer's strike and the actor's strike. And I guess, should we start with the premise of what the strike is about?
Yeah, I think that we got to set the foundation. I actually was just on a show recently where we got criticized because we didn't explain to the audience what's going on. And I think it's a good foundation so that we're all on the same page. I assume that's something that you're able to talk about too. So that should be pretty easy.
Yep.
Okay.
So here's the deal. There are 2 strikes, both of which are related to similar topics, but also different. The writer's strike comes down to pay equity and the use of developing technologies in the writer's room, as well as what a writer's room is. For a long time in Hollywood, what you would have is you'd have shows and movies with large writer's rooms. So, for instance, if you were writing a show like WandaVision, okay, there would be a whole bunch of people in that room, and each person would write parts of an episode or would write episodes, and then they'd come back together and refine the final product. There's a showrunner who runs the writer's room, and that's kind of how that worked. If you're looking for a good point of reference, look at 30 Rock. The writer's room in 30 Rock is how a comedy show is generally. However, there are studios and there are certain writers that break in with that model, and some of them do it to great success, and people don't complain, but some of them don't. A good example of this is someone like Aaron Sorkin, who is wildly successful as a television and movie writer, but writes it all himself and uses the writer's room just as a warehouse for ideas. And so the writers on those shows kind of know what they're in. Other shows, though, are written by one person with no writer. And so one of the things the Writers Guild wants is a standardization of the writers. This is how many people you have to hire so that their membership gets to and what they want is to say, okay, studios, you need to have X number of writers on staff at any given time. How you use them is up to you, right? If you want to have 20 people write an Avengers movie, then great. If that means you only have one person writing something else, that's fine. You still employed the right number of people, right? The other thing they want is pay equity. And the problem they have, and this is one that crosses over, is that the streamers don't tell anyone how many people watch anything.
So, Kyle, just real fast, I don't know if it's just on my end, but you're clipping a little bit, especially when you get quieter.
Better now?
Yes.
Okay. I may have been overmodulating. Turn my microphone down. So anyway, the streamers don't tell people how many views or how many watches something got.
Right.
Therefore, the current contract in terms of residuals, people don't have to get paid. The last thing, and this is the thing that I think will be our crux of our conversation here, is AI usage. Yes. Xbox Gamer, give me a few minutes and we'll talk about that.
I'll favorite that one. There we go.
Yeah, Sorkin is a solo writer that uses them. Right. But what they're doing is they're saying how many writers you have to have on staff at any given time. So Sorkin can go write his shows by himself, but all those other staff members have to be employed. Then the actors are fighting for a similar pay equity problem in terms of because streamers aren't saying how many people are streaming something, then the contracts that actors sign aren't being paid. So a good example of this is Sean Gunn, who you may know as Rocket Raccoon, or
not Rocket.
Yeah, he's the mocap guy for Rocket.
Oh, right, but he's not. He's
right.
Sorry, I get where
he's
you're going.
One half of Rocket Raccoon.
Yeah.
And then he's also the guy who is less good Michael Rooker in Guardians.
right.
I can never remember
Barry Poppins.
Right, he's Barry Poppins, right? But he's been in a lot of things, namely, and the one that he referenced was he was in Gilmore Girls, which is a show that gets tons of views on Netflix. He makes fractions of a cent on that because the idea of streaming didn't exist when they made Gilmore Girls. So when the studio that made Gilmore Girls sold the rights to stream it to Netflix, there was no negotiation for the actors who were on that show to get paid. So the actors want that, but they also want AI banned from that use. The disrespect of Kraglin, it's fair.
No worries. It's kind of about the appropriate amount of respect for Kraglin.
It's true. I mean, he did fine in the New Guardians movie. Anyway, so AI and pay equity are the two big sticking points for everyone. And I'll tell you, one of the things that SAG-AFTRA has really been hounding is that it isn't about the big names, and it isn't. Because I want to be super clear. If you're a big name actor, you can negotiate these things on your own when you sign your deals. If you're a guy that just shows up and is, scared New Yorker in the battle for New York, you get paid by the day and you can't negotiate that. That's a set rate. It's called scale. You get paid scale. If you speak, you get paid a different scale. Right. Her residual was $150 moving Netflix. I know guys who get checks regularly for less than $1 on their streaming residuals. So anyway, that's part of it, but AI is another big part of it with them. So what the studios proposed before the strike happened, what they called a groundbreaking AI plan, was that day actors could show up, get paid for one day's work, get scanned, and the studios would then own their likeness to put in whatever they want in perpetuity. Yeah. It's not good.
No.
So when we talk about why there's a strike happening, those are the important things to remember, is that we're talking about developing technology and how we interact with it, and how the people who create the art that we interact with are compensated for that art. David Zaslav doesn't write, direct, or star in movies. We're talking about the people who write, direct, and star in movies. Now, as a DGA member, we signed a deal. The DGA was able to come up with an equitable deal with SAG-AFTRA because we don't have some of these concerns. And not that we don't have some of these concerns, but because of what directors do being different as a function in the movie making process or the television making process, some of this was less prescient. What directors want to use AI for is not the same thing the studios want to use AI for.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting dichotomy, and it's a weird spot. So the DGA, IATSE, and several others who are not on strike are standing in solidarity with those who are. And so therefore, as I've talked about on other shows, I'm not watching anything that wasn't canceled before May of 2023. Which means I'm watching shows from the late 1970s these days. Super cool. The more I said on the last show I was on, the more people who are dead in the thing I'm watching, the better off I am, because it means I'm further from the picket line. Like, Green Acres right now is my bread and butter because everyone's dead.
Probably pretty safe with like F Troop too, I imagine.
Right. We'll start here, and this is something I want to remind people. Listen to what the unions are asking for. Don't do things they aren't asking for. They're not asking anyone to boycott streamers. I'm not boycotting streamers. I'm still watching things on streaming networks, but the things I'm watching are old things because I don't want to be anywhere near anything struck. It's kind of the answer to that question for me. So once you read what the unions are asking, then you make those decisions on your own. Green Acres is why did I sing twice in one show? God almighty.
Can we get a hat trick?
Oh, I'm sure we can. So that's what I wanted. That we wanted to start by painting the picture of why there's a strike and what that means. The Teamsters, in terms of the UPS strike, they're talking about, again, equitable pay, equitable hours, things like worker safety. Whenever there's a strike of any kind of strike, and I've been a part of a lot of strikes in my life. My dad and grandfather were union auto workers. I've been in unions since I was 18. Been a part of a lot of different strikes. And I live in an area where, like, they were pretty sure Jimmy Hoffa was here for a long time. So unions are big here. No, Pat, I hear you. But that's why I brought it up, is that so when a strike happens, you have to listen to what the unions are saying and then develop your own strike culture.
Yep.
So when General Motors would go on strike, we didn't stop driving Chevy cars, but we also didn't take our cars to Chevy dealers for service or didn't buy new Chevy cars. You know, it's one of those things. You have to define your parameters for your own support of these things. Murdoch says it. Did I just hear Steve Austin yelling, "Can I get a hell no?" It's true. So we're going to talk about what this means. Well, we're going to try. Bronze is going to have to do a lot of the talking, and I'm going to have to nod my head or chime in as we talk about what this means for us as nerds and what this means for everyone else. Now, I will say this. Murdoch says Variety has a pretty good rundown of what SAG-AFTRA is asking for, by the way. I would say if you're looking, go to sagaftra.org. If you go to sagaftrastrike.org, I will put the link in the comments. This is exactly what they're asking for here. When any of the trade magazines publish that stuff, just know that they were also publishing on behalf of the studios. It's not always an honest portrayal. So, just check that out. So, we are all ready to break time. And we've not talked about anything. So, let's do this. Let's take our first break and we'll open the phone lines when we come back. And then we'll get into kind of what the strike and what everything being on strike means for you. And we can even, because they're not on strike and it won't get me in trouble, speculate about what happens when UPS goes on strike. So when we come back, we'll be talking about all that, and the phone line will be open. If you want to write the number down now before we go to break, it's 567-318-6507, 567-318-6507. And you can call in, you can talk to us about these things. But we'll be right back after this break from us. You know how when you go to Comic-Con, after Comic-Con, you go to the hotel bar, and there's a whole bunch of people playing music and dancing, and you've got Pikachu and Lara Croft Tomb Raider doing the cha-cha slide just down from Deadpool and Batman and Wonder Woman? That's every Saturday night over on the Experience Twitch channel. Join Taji Beats for the EXP Dance Party, exclusively on Twitch, twitch.tv/the_EXP.
To be continued. 3 little words that hold the secret to the next great story. 3 words that will thrill you, confound you, give life to new possibilities. Every variation of To Be Continued is a promise. A promise of adventure. A promise of excitement. A promise of unseen wonders and unexplored worlds. A promise that every issue you read makes you a part of a never-ending journey. And behind every page, there will be an unopened door waiting for you. This story to be continued at your local comic book shop. Visit comicshoplocator.com today.
Did you know that every Experience show, including some exclusive content, streams on Twitch? Check it out. twitch.tv/the_EXP. Or just scan that QR code. Welcome back, everybody. This is Devil's Advocates. I am producer Kyle. That guy, which is in the way of my microphone, is in the way of my finger, is Bronze Age Nerd. We are talking about the writers and actors strike and what it means for us as fans of pop culture. And I wanna address a couple of things that we got during the first segment. But before we do, phone lines are open. There, I had to click the button. You can call us 567-318-6507, 567-318-6507, and tell us what you think about this issue. So first, I want to. David Zaslav needs a significant pay cut. I'll be honest. This kind of thinking is part of why there's a lot of misunderstanding here. David Zaslav's job is to make money for already rich people and to keep the wheels turning in the studio system. So market value has set David Zaslav's pay rate, which isn't nearly the highest. And he does his job well. The problem is that we're mistaking salary for studio funds. And it's a very different thing. And here's the thing. He's doing exactly what the people who hired him to do asked him to do, which is spend less money, save money, make us more profits. So he's doing exactly what he's been hired to do in the way he's been assigned to do it. And again, there are other studio heads in Hollywood that are making more than David Zaslav. But we're talking about different pots of money too. So we can get into that a little bit. Xbox Gamer asked, Shannon Doherty is battling breast cancer, and in March, she said she lost her SAG healthcare and called for Fran to fix it. Was it fixed? Here's why Shannon Doherty lost her healthcare. And we kind of talked about this in the first segment. You have to make $26,000 a year as a paid actor to get SAG health insurance. That's not a lot of money. But it is a lot of money if you're someone who shows up for a day or two and stands in the background of a movie. Shannon Doherty has a much more ability to earn than someone whose name you don't know, who's a background actor, but is still a working paid SAG actor. It wasn't fixed because the contract is set, right? There's nothing they can do. What Fran Drescher, who's the president of SAG-AFTRA, could do is create an exception for her, for Shannon Doherty, or for the likes of, I can't think of her name. She was in Cruel Intentions and she has MS. The not Sarah Michelle Gellar girl from Cruel Intentions.
Oh, I'm blanking on her name.
But everybody knows exactly who I'm talking about.
Yeah. Starts with an S.
Jay will come up with it in a second and make me feel bad for not remembering.
Selma Blair.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Selma Blair, right? They can create exceptions for people like that who can't work because of health. But if they were getting equitable pay for the streaming rights of the programs they worked on before, it wouldn't be a problem. So that's part of that. Pat says SDCC is going to be about comics for the first time in years. It's true. And it'll be interesting to see what comes out of San Diego because it's about comics.
Yeah. I think that's one of the more interesting ramifications of this situation is there's been a lot of talk about the more, I'll call it Hollywoodized aspect of nerd culture having to back away from SDCC or at least minimize their presence because of what's going on. And that is actually something that I talked about the other night is it'll be really, I would think I was on the Beyond Wednesday show with Brian McClay and I mentioned that it'll be really cool to see, a lot of people have been asking for that for years. Personally, I think it's really awesome to see everything under the umbrella of nerd culture at SDCC, but I do think that element has kind of taken over in some ways and made it less about comics and more about things that are kind of loosely comic book related.
Right.
So this year should serve as a good barometer to see if what does that do? How does that affect people? I know that from everything I've seen so far, attendance, all that kind of stuff looks like it's going to be pretty much on par with what it has been before. And so because of that, I think that it's going to be a really healthy turnout. And maybe some of those people that would have spent time waiting for the Hall H, shows or something like that will find themselves interacting more with, things like comic books or comic book related merchandise. They'll find on the show floor. And honestly, that's like my experience going to cons that have been more comic book focused versus more celebrity focused. You have a completely different experience. Some people will enjoy that, some people won't. I think I have a really good feeling about SDCC this year. That doesn't mean it's going to be a good show or a better show or anything for it, but I think there's a dynamic that almost needed to get changed there. Is how I interpret it anyway, and how I will see if it goes. I'm really curious to see. I think everybody kind of is looking at it that way, and that should make it for a much more interesting show this year. Probably more interesting than it's been in years, because let's face it, like MCU announcements or Star Wars announcements, I mean, they're fun, but they also have gotten a little stale. There's almost like this really repetitious press cycle that gets kind of baked into everything. Now what I can't speak to, because I've never been to SDCC, is the presence, the being in some of those hall meetings and seeing the presentations firsthand. I observe it from my computer chair, looking at stuff on my computer, like looking at the actual releases and the press conferences and stuff. And to me, it's like I felt that way about like video for years.
We got one ring and it stopped.
Oh, okay.
So, Ian, if you want to call back, go ahead and try. I don't know why it only rang once. Do I think it will hurt San Diego?
Oh, there we go.
Let's talk to Ian first.
Yeah.
What's up, man?
What's up?
Ian, what do you have to say? What do you think about the writer's strike here, man?
I think that every CEO that's making 400 times what their lowest earning employee is earning needs to go. I think that's the problem. I think when you have capitalism taking over art, you're going to get the product we have, and we've been seeing that for the past 10 years.
I think that's a fair assertion. I think the only way that the artists can command what they're trying to command is if there's someone above them making more. Like that's kind of the problem, right? If there's no desire to be the CEO, there's no desire to make that kind of money.
But the CEO is not an artist.
Right.
Or is the CEO a writer?
Right. But if the artist can't point to somebody and say, hey, look at that guy, you're paying him all this money, pay us more, then everybody's pointing at Samuel L. Jackson.
I don't think anyone's pointing at Samuel L. Jackson. I think they're pointing at CEOs.
No, I'm saying
Samuel L. Jackson isn't the CEO.
If the CEOs don't exist, now you have to point at the actor who grosses the most.
Okay.
Well, I think let me kind of take the middle road here between kind of what you're saying and what Ian's saying here. Even though, what if instead of talking about the absolute end of the spectrum, how about moderating the salary of the CEOs to a more reasonable level? I think that's something that is kind of maybe. Can you agree with that, Ian? Is that something that's more along the lines where you saying? Okay, there we go. Yeah, because I mean,
I can get behind that idea. Like,
yeah, I think that CEOs definitely it's competitive, right? Like the capitalism argument for CEO salary has a sound base and logic. It's just the levels that it gets taken to that I often feel like, well, okay, yeah, I understand they should make a good amount of money to stay competitive because you want to attract a high quality CEO. But again, like, kind of like Ian started off with, it's 400 times as much, or it's just some insane level of extra amount of pay. it can be hard to justify that when you have members of some strata of that business that are, barely making above minimum wage or are making minimum wage, are having problems paying their health care. And so if that money can be redistributed and make the CEO still as well paid as they should be to attract the talent, I think that's kind of almost a fair market argument, really.
And there's another part of this that's a little bit mistaken, in that CEOs necessarily aren't paid what they earn. For instance, Zaslav is a good example of this. Doesn't make the money they're reporting he makes. What he makes from being
He makes way more.
No. What he makes for being the CEO is actually less than what David Zaslav earns. Like, his CEO salary is maybe only $20 million.
Right,
He
but his
earns
salary comes from income, from bonus
$460
income.
million because the incredibly rich people he's making incredibly richer keep giving him more. As like
His
you said,
salary isn't the
bonuses and
problem, it's
stuff.
his bonus income.
Right. So the idea of eliminating bonuses is something I can certainly get behind.
Yeah, or at least
Right.
capping their
I don't
structure or
say
somehow.
get behind that either, though. Bonuses should be deserved. People should work and work hard and then earn a bonus.
Well, and
But
that's what he's
there's no
doing.
justification for the bonus that Zaslav gets. There's no justification behind it.
There's no justification to you and I. But if
Well,
you're
or
already
anyone
a
else.
billionaire who's invested in Warner DC, there is justification for paying him that. So if they were to somehow in this collective bargaining cap his ability to earn those bonuses and use that bonus pay to filter down, then that would sort of do what Bronze is suggesting in terms of limiting that disparity, right?
Absolutely.
I think that it's
Go ahead. Amazing. I mean, I 100% agree with that. That's exactly what we need to do.
Right. So, I mean, if he earns his salaries and we cap the bonus structure, which, by the way, has been floated through Congress several times to cap some of these things in terms of the tax incentives these people get for giving these bonuses, the tax incentives the companies get for giving bonuses. They did it with the airlines, where airline CEOs were getting $100 million bonuses when the airlines were bankrupt and couldn't pay their pensions. They've done that in Congress. So they're talking about...
Not really.
They have. It's never
I mean,
passed.
they
but
put a
they floated
facade
it.
up of doing that, but they haven't actually done anything effective.
Right.
Right,
No,
that's what
you
he's
gotta
saying.
pass it. And they had never been able to pass it. But they've tried. And that's what I'm saying, is that you have to do it through collective bargaining and not through active government. And that's again why we're having a strike. So it's this idea of, yes, we need to limit what the CEOs can make. But again, a CEO is a person doing a job that's been described for them by their employer. So their salary should be what their salary is. And then if the employer wants to give them a bonus, then there's another additional, okay, well, because this bonus was paid out, everyone who worked for that studio this year gets X percentage, like a profit sharing kind of concept, which is what they've done in the auto industry, right? There's profit sharing. So the CEO gets their bonus, but also the rest of the profits get shared among the labor. So I think that you're right, Ian, in that we need to eliminate some of the high earning that these CEOs are making. But again, we need to remember that when what we're talking about here isn't necessarily where the money is going or who the money is going to. It's about pay equity. If Sam Jackson,
absolutely.
Can make $100 million on a movie and a day player is making $1,500 a day, there's a problem there too. Right?
I agree.
It's there's a level of pay equity across the board, and SAG needs to address it in their house as well. And don't get me wrong, if you're starring in a movie, you should definitely get more than the guy who showed up, ate a pretzel, and left. Because I've done that on movie sets where I show up, I get my $1,500 and leave, because they've not needed me or whatever. It's this that needs to be addressed in their own house. But yeah, I think we need to get to some sort of profit sharing or collective bargaining agreement with the studios that includes, okay, if you're paying your CEO a $1.2 billion bonus, then you need to also pay us $1.2 billion, and we'll divide it amongst ourselves.
Yeah. See, that's something I don't agree with, because I don't believe the CEO deserves a $1.2 million bonus. What does the CEO do?
Whatever the investors and the ownership of the company tell him to.
But what is that?
I don't know. I'm not a CEO of a studio.
I don't either. That's my point. I don't know what that is either.
Right, but that's again.
And I don't think a lot of people know what that is.
Right, but that's not necessarily for us to know.
Can we begin to justify that?
Well, I mean, David Zaslav cutting the losses of Warner Discovery by a lot.
The losses that he created.
No, the losses that came when Warner and Discovery merged. Like, that was a loss leader for them.
But wasn't he the CEO?
No. He was appointed the CEO of the joint company. He may have been the CEO of one of the companies, but when they merged, it was a loss leader. They immediately became billions and billions and billions of dollars in debt.
Because of the merge that he approved?
No, because of the merge the owners approved.
But he was beholden to the owners.
Right.
Okay.
So if Ian, what do you do for a living, man?
I'm a cloud architect for the government.
Okay. So if the architecture firm that you work with, right, tells you to make a building round, you have to make a building round, right?
No, I will argue with that.
Well, but if a government,
yes, maybe, perhaps, yes.
If your boss tells you to do a thing, you have to do it, right?
Not necessarily. I have a little bit of autonomy.
Sure.
But, yeah, I understand your point.
But so does David Zaslav. But if they tell him, hey, we're doing this thing, he's got to do it. And if the people who are the shareholders in Warner Brothers say, we're going to buy Discovery even at a huge loss, and we're going to go into debt to buy Discovery because it's worth this much, or just vice versa, David Zaslav just does it because that's his job. And then when they tell him, hey, cut losses, then he has to do that because that's his job. When my boss tells me...
He's supposed to do that.
Right. No, exactly. He's doing his job. So what else is included in that? I don't know, because it's not a job I've ever done. But when I worked in radio, for instance, when the CEO of my company, which, by the way, was $20 billion in debt when I worked there, would tell me I have to fire on-air talent because they cost too much, I didn't get to argue with him. I could say, well, I really think we should keep this guy. He brings a lot of community value, yada, yada, yada. His contract's not up. And they said, let him go. At the end of the day, they're the ones who cut the paychecks. They're the ones who worry about the books. They're the ones who are counting the pennies. I got to do what they tell me.
But is that not a mismanagement issue if the company is $20 million in debt?
That's what growth costs.
That's inherently a mismanagement issue from the beginning.
Well, that's what it takes to take a cluster of 5 radio stations to the largest privately owned company in the United States. I mean, growth is growth, even if it costs money.
But growth is not a infinite thing. Growth is finite. And that's the problem we're dealing with. People do not acknowledge growth as being a finite issue.
Sure, but at the same time, when you're the size of a company like Warner Discovery, growth is much less finite than it is for other people. Right? Their growth could be in markets that we don't know about. China, India, places like that where they're seeing huge growth when in the US they're not. So,
okay.
Like, for instance, when I was working for the company I was working for, when I was in radio, they got to as big as they could be in the US. The FCC would not allow them to buy any more stations. So what did they do? They started buying stations in Canada and Mexico. And then they started buying stations in South America and Japan and Europe and places like that, to the point where they grew and grew and grew. And they got to the point where they were so large that they hit that wall. But it was much.
And then they had to lay off people domestically. Then they had to lay off people in America because they believed in exponential growth without limitation.
They had to lay off people across the board.
Yeah,
everywhere.
Because they failed as management.
But they didn't, because their job is to make money. They're $20 billion in debt, but these people are making enough to own 747s on their own. Like,
that's the problem.
We're talking
That's
about
exactly my point. That is the problem. These people should not be earning 747s, 737s, G6s, anything. They should not have jets. They should not have these things when they're failing the people below them.
So, okay, let me ask you this question, and I'm going to ask it in a way that I'm not even comfortable asking, okay?
Sure.
If I grow the experience as the executive producer of the experience, if I grow the experience so big that Warner Brothers Discovery wants to buy the experience, and I know Warner Brothers Discovery is in debt, that's why they're cutting so much stuff. Am I supposed to say no to them? Or am I supposed to seriously consider their deal?
I don't know why you'd want to be in business with them. I don't know why that would even be a consideration.
Because the kind of money they would be offering would be life-changing money for someone like me.
Yeah, that's like the same thing as Snapchat being bought out by Facebook.
Yeah.
Snapchat is more profitable independently. You'd be more profitable independently as well. Grow your channel, make it awesome. I love your channel. But don't sell out to Warner Brothers because they're not going to do any favors. They don't do anyone any favors.
But once I sell my channel, not my problem anymore. Right? Like, this is the problem, is we're talking about this.
Is your channel a problem now? I
no.
mean, like, you're saying like you're going to pawn off a problem. Like,
no, what I'm saying is,
once I sell, your channel is a labor of love.
Oh, it is. Believe me, it is. But
so
once I sell, because if somebody brings me $100 million and says, Kyle, sell this thing, I can sell it and start something new.
That's the thing.
I can sell it and do something different.
You can start over bigger than you did before,
right.
doing something that, is version 2.0 of what you did before.
Correct.
I mean, that's just one possible motivation.
Right. What we're talking about
then you're competing against yourself at that point.
Yeah. If I were to sell the experience to someone, right? For instance, Discovery buying Time Warner, right? So if Discovery Time Warner was going to buy me, the experience, they're not going to buy me. They're going to buy the IP. They're going to buy the shows. They're going to buy this stuff. Then I'm going to turn around and take that money. Right. Then I'm going to turn around and take that money and build my next thing. So maybe it's, instead of this, I'm opening the biggest comic shop in the country. I'm starting another network that does something slightly different than this one. Sure, I'm still competing against myself or competing against this thing I built, but what they do with this doesn't concern me anymore because I'm moving on to the next project. That the whole conversation we're having right now happens in a utopian world, right? In a world where there's no such thing as human greed, when there's no such thing as I want to do something different or I want to do something more. We're talking about a world where the rich are happy being rich and don't want to be richer. Right? We're talking about
we're also enabling them to be richer, but with this mindset where I'm going to sell off this greatly successful thing that I've done that's obviously worth money. I'm going to sell that off to someone that's richer. That's part of the problem with the mindset.
But that lets
if you have something that's great, that's making money, you should keep it.
But by selling it, I'm able to do this other thing that I want to do.
But you're also making the rich richer and to the detriment of everyone else.
But again, and this is why I'm asking the question, right? Because it's not to the detriment of me. And
no,
greed,
but to the detriment of anyone else other than you.
Right. But
or
that's
the studio that you sell to.
But that's how people make decisions. So
also in this hypothetical situation, it's important to remember that a lot of times those acquisitions don't work out very well.
Right.
And you do see, things rise from the ashes of that business. Now, I mean, then again, no one's saying you have to sell.
Right.
The argument just becomes that there pretty much is a price for people at some point.
Right.
Nothing is truly priceless in this world. It's just the way it works, unfortunately. The way I look at it anyway.
I mean, and the other thing is, and we could get into hostile takeovers and all this other kind of thing that happened, but the end of the page is that these CEOs are getting paid what they're getting paid for a reason. We don't necessarily understand the reason. And I think it's grotesque how much they get paid. But I have to, in order to believe that I can make what I make, I have to believe in the existence of fair market value for services. Right? Otherwise, I shouldn't get paid what I get paid. Somebody could say Kyle gets paid too much to be the executive producer of the experience, so he should make less. But fair market value for my services say that what I make for doing this is what the market will bear for what I do. So
I don't think there's anything wrong with what you're saying with that. I agree with you on that.
Yeah,
part.
so
Absolutely.
that's kind of the problem, is that we don't know what the fair market value of a CEO of a movie studio is, and we don't know what they're being tasked with. For all we know,
I think we can fairly say it's not worth 4,000 times their lowest worker. I think that's a fair assessment.
and I don't disagree with you, but at the same time, for us to sit here and say that without knowing that is to argue a point without all the facts.
Right, because look, here's another part of that. Just consider this. Again, we're, the kind of thing where we got started on this hypothetical is a bit is if that CEO is very successful in that role, and they are the ones that drove billions of dollars worth of profit, if they get a few percentage points off of that as a bonus from the people who own the company, yes, it's a grotesque amount of money, but instead of making $400 million, let's say they're making $5 million or $1 million, and they get a few percents on that bonus. You can definitely talk about reforming that bonus structure. You can talk about things like, if I give a CEO 100% of a bonus we agreed upon, then I'm also going to match that or give 200% of that value to everybody in the company on a scale. There's different ways you could reform that, but the simple idea that somebody gets a bonus for doing a job well done shouldn't be off the table, in my opinion. And so once it's just kind of a question of where do you set the limits once you agree that that's something that's going to be possible in a business.
Absolutely. So Ian, we're gonna let you go. We're gonna get back to it. Thank you for calling in. I can't tell you how much I appreciate when people call in.
Yeah,
it really does make the show so much more fun. Man. And
awesome.
I loved arguing with you, even though we agree. I want you to understand that we agree.
I don't think we argued. We had a discussion. We didn't argue.
Well,
right.
Like, I love having that discussion with people, even when I agree with them, and I could take the other side and get to have some fun with it. So I really do appreciate you calling in, Ian. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Love your show.
Thanks,
I'll
man.
Keep watching.
We'll be here.
Thanks.
All right. We need to take our next break, but I want to hit this real quick. It's not what the CEOs are worth or not. It's about what the people making the product are worth. And we're going to talk about that when we come back from the break. The phone lines will stay open. I have a feeling we're going to go a little long tonight. Maybe not too long because I haven't eaten in like 13 hours, but a little long tonight. And we're going to talk about the AI of all of this. So when we come back, we'll keep going on this topic. Stay tuned.
You just finished the last episode of your favorite news show, and you just have to talk about it. But all your friends are ghosting you because of that incident last week at the buffet. Oh, you know the one. What you did to that chowder. Ugh. Keeps me up at night. So what do? Join writer Dan Wickline as he breaks down all your favorite pop culture media. Whether it's a review of the latest nerdy TV show or a dive back into the history of your favorite comic characters, Dan's ready to discuss all the hottest topics live. Join the conversation as Dan live streams Tuesday through Thursday at 5 Eastern, 2 Pacific on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. The Dan Wickline Show on The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales.
Go follow The Experience on TikTok at @the_EXP1, or scan the QR code on the screen. Our TikTok is like everywhere else we are, except you only have to deal with us for a minute. Seems like a win-win to me. Welcome back, everybody. This is Devil's Advocates. We are talking about the SAG-AFTRA and WGA strikes. And one of the big functions, one of the big sticking points for both unions is the use of AI. And in the things I'm reading, it's not necessarily being called AI. So I want you to understand that when they say developing technologies, they're talking about AI.
Well, but which is kind of smart though, because just like, with the last time that there were negotiations, and I think it was 1980, the AI wasn't something that was on the radar. You're kind of including things that could come down the road too.
Right. That's exactly it. So I, in research yesterday, started playing with ChatGPT. And I'm going to say this about AI. This is how you get Terminators. And it's bad. It's real bad. Because this is how you get Terminators. So one of the sticking points from both unions is the use of AI. And we talked early in the show about the idea that the studios wanted to be able to scan a background actor, pay them for one day, and use their likeness in perpetuity. Also, I've seen constructs that have been made with big name actors where they could potentially continue making movies starring that actor well after that actor is dead.
Can I give an example of something similar to that might be important? So one thing that this happened, I think about a year or two ago, and I'm doing this from memory, so if I get a detail wrong, I apologize. But one thing that people have kind of wondered about is James Earl Jones' portrayal of Darth Vader. And if you are a fan of Star Wars or if you're a fan of Darth Vader, there's a lot of actors that have also voice acted Darth Vader over time, and none of them can get that James Earl Jones voice that is just synonymous with Darth Vader. And so one thing he did was he went and gave his permission, and he had a voice library recorded that should theoretically allow performances to be constructed from his voice samples that would allow his voice to live on as Darth Vader. Now, that's a very specific situation because you're talking about somebody who's played that character for a very long time. I imagine from James Earl Jones that there's some love to fans there where he knows fans want to hear his voice as Darth Vader. I'm sure that ties into it. He's very proud of the work there. But, you do kind of raise this question. If that's something that were to happen to a working actor now, what kind of implications does that have for their, maybe there's actors that would be willing to do that if they got paid for those future performances a certain way. Hey, I have a unique voice. I want to license it to you. You can use my voice without me coming in for recording sessions. Let's talk numbers or something about what that could look like for pay. But just being paid for one day to do that, or one session gig, come on, that's a little extreme in my opinion. So I can totally understand where this might be an opinion that they want to have changed.
Well, and there's certainly, and there's certainly options for exclusivity and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So if James Earl Jones is exclusively licensing his voice for that purpose to Disney to be used exclusively in Star Wars movies or animated series or Star Wars content,
yeah,
that's all outlined in whatever contract James Earl Jones signed, and Disney signed, their rep, their CEO, whoever signed when they made this deal. Yes, some people have already done this, right? With like Peter Cushing, they went out to the estate.
Yeah.
Right. and they got permission from Peter Cushing's estate to CGI Peter Cushing, not AI Peter Cushing.
Right.
Like, there's a difference. I don't really know what that difference is in that instance, but there's a difference, right?
Yeah.
And it's an interesting difference that's going to have to be sorted as this tech develops.
It's actually extremely important, because one thing that I've talked about before, there's this general backlash against AI right now, and it's very understandable. But there's also this point that you have to make, which is AI technologies in those CGI shots could have been used to generate some of that CGI. Does that mean that the portrayal in Rogue One was AI? It kind of becomes a semantics issue, because if those technologies help support the creation that digital artists were doing, at what level do you start to say that AI was used to generate that? And that's a fair question. So it's uncharted territory. That's why these questions come up.
Right. And that's why the language in these deals is so important. Right. And that's so 20 or 30 years ago, when they negotiated the previous deal that the actors had to live under, residuals were paid based on reruns of shows. Well, back then, you had to get to 100 episodes to be able to be eligible for syndication. Then you'd go into syndication and you would get paid an amount based on every time that show ran. And that amount came out of what the network was paying the studio. So MASH, for instance, is a good example, because MASH has been in nonstop syndication since the day MASH went off the air. Okay. When those deals were negotiated in the 80s, it went back, and so any airings of MASH after that, those actors got paid whatever the syndication deal was, whatever the amount was. But some of those networks had negotiated their terms before that deal was made. So all of a sudden, the networks are paying money to a studio's paying an actor, and the network's not paying enough to cover the actors. So now the studio has to go back and renegotiate with the network. And that's why you see shows go off of syndication shows go off of networks. They don't want to pay that money anymore because it commands too much. Or when a show gets really successful in syndication on a network, now all of a sudden the studio's going back, well, give us more money. And they're going, no, we're good, thanks. You know, the network's going to go, no, we're good, thanks. And then they're going to...
And to add some context to that, I mean, you got to consider the reason why a network is wanting a show in syndication anyways, because it doesn't have anywhere near the same amount of cost as producing a new show for that time slot.
Right.
So if it starts to creep up above the level where viewership matters, you know, they're going to kind of, they're not getting the same advertising revenue that way. They're going to wonder.
Right. And I will tell you this, it's why reality TV is so prevalent these days. The guys from Impractical Jokers don't get paid for reruns of Impractical Jokers. They get paid for the first run episode and I think one additional run. And that's their deal. Because it's reality TV. Right? So they don't get paid when they run Impractical Jokers all day. And that's part of the deal. So when we talk about movies and television, there's so much nuance in that breakdown too. That's important to remember.
Yeah.
But so when we talk about AI, when we kind of get back to that topic, there's this idea of what is and isn't in bounds with AI. And so one of the things from SAG or from the WGA is they want no AI anywhere near a writer's room. They want to enshrine in their contracts that if a studio uses AI to write a show, that they're not trying to pass that off as the work of a writer. They're not claiming there was a writer's room. There's no stipulation that, oh, we hired somebody to edit the AI. We're going to give them writer credit. No. If it's written by humans. If you want to use AI to generate prompts for your game show, or concepts for sitcom ideas and then have the regular writers write them, I think that's something they can negotiate. But they want to make sure there's no AI in the writer's room. And at the same time, the actors are worried about their likenesses.
Yep.
Don't capture my likeness and use it as you want. So I think this developing tech of AI is a big thing.
And if you guys, if you, after we're done here, if you want to support it, if you want to watch it, a really good thing that covered this recently is the first episode of the new season of Black Mirror. That episode is entitled "Joan is Awful," and there is a really good kind of, in the Black Mirror way, dark look at what AI technology could do for portraying somebody who wasn't fully willing to be portrayed that way. If you want to kind of have, that in the skin feeling for a second of what that could feel like to you, that's a really good example.
Right. If you want a less good version, but probably a better movie or show, Terminator.
John Connor would be mad at all of us for having these conversations.
Right. John Connor would be super pissed. But it's the joke I made to Bronze earlier. I go, the reality of AI is that because we don't know what it could be completely capable of yet, it could, an actress you're in love with could show up at your front door and it's AI and you have no way of knowing. And now they're a Terminator and they're killing you.
Hey, 1 second. I got to go. Katie Salkoff is at the front door, so I'm going to go.
Right. Exactly. What did I use earlier? Olivia Wilde.
Yeah.
Because I wanted you to make the pun you made when we were on the phone earlier, which is that's wild. Anyway, I built my joke. No, so it's this idea, and so let's head towards wrapping up here with this idea of what we're waiting to hear is collective bargaining. Right? These organizations, SAG-AFTRA, and they have negotiating teams, right? So it's not just we're waiting. I just lost my complete train of thought. We're waiting on these negotiating teams to sit with the AMPTP and talk out real actionable terms to come to a deal. So in collective bargaining, both sides have to give. And so the question is, what are the actors and writers willing to give? And what are the studios willing to give? And right now, everybody's acting like they're not willing to give anything. But the truth is they are. The truth is that they are. And so we're waiting to see what that looks like. And I suspect that from a actor standpoint, there's going to be some negotiation on the pay equity. That's a whole thing. That's not going to change. Right? Studios are going to have to be willing to give up something to get the actors back in. And it's going to likely be that either they have to open their books to third-party accounting. So here's the studio books, third-party accounting. Third-party accounting spits out a number. Here's SAG-AFTRA. This is what they owe you. Right? It could still.
And we all know how notoriously crazy Hollywood accounting is.
Right. It can all be secretive, like through that lens. Or, they can raise the rates of day players. They could promise not to use AI. They can do all of these things to create that pay equity. And so that will be interesting to see who gives what and what they give. My expectation, the thing I suspect, is that actors will come to terms on AI before they come to terms on pay. And I think what you'll see, at least as a first step in maybe a sort of interim deal as they start to sort this stuff out and get back to work, maybe in like a 2-year deal or a 4-year deal rather than a 30-year deal, is, okay, I'm Ryan Reynolds. I'm going to sign on to do this movie. I will let you use AI versions of me for X, Y, and Z things. So in this giant stunt scene that's really dangerous, you could use AI to replace me so we don't have to put a stunt actor in danger. Right? There's no way we can get this stunt without it. Or, you can use it for this particular film for marketing. But that's it. That's the level. Like they'll negotiate those terms as to what that can look like. As a whole. For writers, I think it's going to be a lot more give on the part of the studios. And Mike, I see you. The stunt union is going to have a problem with that. But I guarantee you the stunt union would be good with, hey, we can't do this without killing someone. Kind of, thing.
Well, but also I think maybe where Michael's coming from, you kind of, there's a word for that type of logic problem, and I'm not able to pull it right now. But at some point, are the creatives going to go, well, this stunt would be even crazier if we made it so that it would kill somebody, so that we are going to use AI because it's cheaper. Like you start to run into that kind of
right. No, I hear that, but it's like there are stunts that Tom Cruise has done in movies that, like, if they get wrong, Tom Cruise is dead.
Yeah.
And Tom Cruise doesn't use a stunt double. Like, that's what I'm talking about, is we're going to do this stunt. We're going to have it ready in AI just in case we can't get it right. Or we're going to do this stunt and we're going to make the fire AI rather than having to actually blow Tom Cruise up. Right? Yeah. It'll be, these are the rules for using those things.
For sure.
Right? And that's what I mean by collective bargaining. They're good. The actors and the writers are going to have to give on some of these things. And the studio is going to have to give on some of these things. And that's the thing that's most interesting to me, is figuring out what things are going to give.
Yeah.
We did mention that we would talk about the UPS strike. I heard UPS is brutal. It's work for 30 days and it's 50-50 if you make it in the union at $16.50 an hour pay. That's part of it. But also, for me at least, the thing that I know about UPS is this.
Yeah.
AC in the trucks.
Well, and there was a video that went viral last summer, I think, of a worker, driver passing out as he tried to deliver a package. I want to say it was in the Texas area, and it was extremely hot. And yeah, I mean, it's incredibly basic stuff. When we're talking about worker safety, that's a huge reason why you would want to do that.
Right. I saw a video yesterday of a guy who put hot dogs on the antenna of his car because where he lives, it's so hot, they'll cook. Like, I wouldn't want to drive a big brown truck all day and have to lift heavy boxes in weather that'll cook a hot dog.
Yep.
I'll be honest. It's like 78 degrees here, and I'm going, I need more fans. So I would not be equipped for that job.
Well, it's bad when the USPS is putting air conditioning in their new trucks.
Right. So there's a level of worker safety there, but what does that mean for you as a comic book fan? Well, it's going to mean delays, or maybe it won't. Like, this is the thing about collective bargaining, is UPS's leverage is they're the number one freight shipper. They're the number one shipper of things. Like, I think they're in front of FedEx. Right? So it's going to cause massive delays on things. For comic books, UPS is the number one shipper of comic books. Their Diamond uses them. They do have options for FedEx at Diamond.
Yeah.
Everybody is using FedEx or UPS. So all of a sudden, comic books are not going to get distributed the way they have been. Miss Jen was telling me that in the last time there was a UPS strike, what they would do is they would LTL pallets of comics to a central drop location in cities. And store owners would have to drive to that location, find their boxes on the pallets, load them up in their own personal cars, and drive them back to their stores. If you don't live in a city where there's a lot of comic book shops, sometimes you're driving a really long way. I have a friend who has a shop in Adrian, Michigan, which is about an hour from here. He would likely have to drive an hour to here to get his comics. to take them back to his shop and sell them. That's cutting into the margin that's already razor thin on those comics.
Absolutely, especially in time too, if nothing else.
Right.
Time is money. And I mean, I know I did see a press release or not a press release, a statement to stores from Diamond too that was talking about the options they're looking into, or the fact that they are looking into other options, and then we can kind of all imagine what some of those things are. But I think at the end of the day, it'll be kind of the UPS strike is one that has been seen coming for a while, and the workers have a really strong case there for getting their demands met. But from what I've heard, the workers union expects this to be like a 2-week strike.
Right.
Now, once the strike starts, if it starts, anything can happen, of course, but it'll probably be small, but it's something you want to consider, especially if you are in the retailer side of the comic book business.
Yeah. And I agree, figure drawing FedEx is the worst, but it's better than getting nothing at all.
Have you guys heard of DHL? I'm just wondering.
I hate DHL.
Yeah, I would say DHL is the worst, but hey, no offense to people that work at DHL. I'm sure I think it's the management of the company probably, but
I hate DHL's tracking system.
Yeah.
It's like, what did I tell somebody earlier? I have a problem with someone, not because of anything they did, but because of their scheduling. Like, I have a hard time scheduling with them. Like, it's FedEx and DHL are the same way for me. I don't love their tracking systems. Anyway, so that's something to be watching out for. So how does the SAG-AFTRA strike affect you as pop culture fans? We didn't even get to a lot of that stuff.
I think I have a way I can kind of sum that up, or at least my thoughts on it.
Yep.
So, and by the way, I'm really pleased with the chat and how forward thinking the chat's been tonight. I expected some anti-union, anti-strike sort of comments. Didn't see any of that, and maybe some people have them and they're just not voicing them as actively. Of course, there are people that have those sentiments, and you're welcome to your opinions on that. But what I would say, and this is how I kind of look at this discussion. One thing that's mattered to me for a long time now is how comic book creators that are responsible for creating characters that end up in movies and TV shows aren't getting paid for their work, for their creations and what they've done. So if you think about it through that lens, if you want to, go back and give some of these wonderful people that have brought us these wonderful characters that we've enjoyed in many different mediums now, and give them the advice that, hey, you should be negotiating this in some kind of a contract or forming a union so that you can get paid properly, because when you're in your old age and there's a movie that comes out that's making hundreds of millions of dollars, you will feel like you did not get a piece of that pie when you deserved it for what you did. And of course, some creatives do, writers tend to do more than artists, but really the interesting element here is that I think everybody in comic books agrees that it's not right to see somebody not get paid for something that came from their work. Extrapolate that to like the AI argument for the SAG-AFTRA movement. You would hate to see somebody have this extremely successful film 20 years down the road based on their voice, based on their face, that AI is used to create some sort of movie that is then, the next Avatar, the next Titanic, the next blockbuster, and they got, whatever that one day rate was, the $12,000 or whatever less, or I don't even know, not enough down the road. So I think that's a really good lens to kind of look at this through if you're looking for a way to be a little more empathetic to the situation. Think about how it'll affect creatives of all types down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, just someone mentioned the stunt union. The stunt woman for Resident Evil franchise was severely hospitalized and handing bills with a strike coupler. It'll depend on what union she's in. There are several unions you can be a member of as a stunt worker or a stunt professional. It'll depend on that union. Frog Brawler, Northwest Ohio.
And I will say it only got up to about 80.
Right. It's only 78 degrees here because we're so close to the lake. It stays 78 degrees because the lake water.
Yeah.
Believe me, the air temperature was much hotter.
And I'm here in Washington. It's about 80 here right now, but the humidity is high enough that it does not feel very comfortable. 80 degrees. Yeah. So
All right. So so the big takeaways here are everything's delayed. I want you to think. I didn't bring it up, but the writers' rooms for the fall series of shows would have started in June. It's July, so you're already 2 months behind on the fall series. That means the winter series, everything else has to wait. So just know everything's delayed. Peter David had a GoFundMe because he's in the hospital and was writing for Marvel Joe Fix It, I believe. Some of that, like, that's a different demon altogether. Xbox Gamer, that's about work for hire and pay rates for artists and creators. It's a whole different ball of wax that I could talk on for hours as well.
Right. And so is what I brought up earlier too. It's about that aspect. It's just, to me, that there's a logical connection between the two when you start to think about the legacy of those creators and what they get paid. But yeah, it is a different situation for sure.
Right. And so I just want to end with this comment Figure Drawing had a while back. The execs are not evil for their treatment of writers, actors. They're taking advantage of the system. And that's exactly it, right? So right now, all of this is happening because there's a system that isn't functioning the way it should. It did for a lot of years. But with the advancement of technology, with the pandemic, with things that are happening, the system has to be refined. And that's why we have this strike. It's the strike over the refinement of the system and what that means.
Yeah.
So I think everyone is acting for the betterment of everyone. The studios are acting in a way that they think will make their product better and make them more profitable and able to do more. The actors and the writers are acting in the best interest of, the creatives who make the things. But because so much is changing so fast, that's why, we have collective bargaining, right? We have to figure out what can both sides give up to get to a place where everything else is better.
I love that comment.
I want to make a t-shirt, DHL is garbage.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we will be back next week with a conversation about something. We haven't really decided what that will be yet.
And by the way, as I like to remind everybody every week, you can help influence what that conversation is about. If you want us to talk about a specific topic, if there's something that matters to you, if there's something that you think isn't being addressed in the comic book community, if there's something that you think is, like a hot take between two different ideas about comic books, let us know. We'd love to hear what you really want to see tackled, what you want to see my opinion on, what you want to see Kyle's opinion on. If you want to see if we would have some kind of disagreement, there's a link in the chat right now where you can go fill out a web form and suggest those ideas to us. We would absolutely appreciate that because we want to talk about the things you guys want to listen to us talk about.
Absolutely. So I want to thank Ian for calling in, Xbox Gamer, Pat, Frog Brawler, everybody who's been in the chat, Figure Drawing, everybody, Michael, who's chimed in the chat. Yeah, I think we all are, Frog Brawler. As a union member, I have to be, but I wouldn't be a union member if I weren't. So for everyone here, I want to say thank you to everybody who participated. Thank you for being a part of our show. Thank you for doing this. We will see everybody next week. Do you remember what it was like when you were a little kid and you got a letter in the mail? Now imagine that letter was filled with information about your favorite shows, pop culture questions, links to things you're going to want to see later, and even sneak peeks at upcoming programming here on The Experience. That's what the EXP mailing list is. Every week, we send you sneak peeks, information, and all of the relevant links for all of the shows you want to see. Sign up now on our website or scan the QR code that's on your screen.